we go. Okay. So we're actually going to do a circle. We're all going to stand up. If you feel like you cannot stand for a while, that's fine. You can grab a chair. But we're going to circle up and we're going to introduce ourselves. And I'm going to put up our prompts for us. So yeah, I know it's the end of the evening, but stand up. We got this. Come on here. I think we can make a loop right around here. And maybe just hold. This is the only part where I'll be. Okay. Okay, everybody, and we want to focus on everybody, at least on the outside of the circle, nobody on the inside. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with our name, pronouns that you'd like to be referred to, what neighborhood or town you hail from, and when is the first time a bird stood out to you? Those people on Zoom, please start putting this in the chat so we can see that. Okay. Can I ask you to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlotte. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Narberth, and first bird was probably watching cardinals in the wintertime in the backyard when I was a little kid in West Philly, and it just seems so exotic, especially the way they stood out against us, and it caught my interest.
Yeah, I'm Peter Schiffer. I'm originally from Switzerland, and so I'm he, and I live in Philadelphia, about 15 minutes away from here. And I don't remember when, I'm pretty old, when I saw my first bird, the attention to it. But let's say just the rouge gorge, which would be the European robin.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Justin, he, him. I live here in Center City. I guess the first time birds stood out was like the weird little holes that sapsuckers make on a tree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Sarah, she and her. I'm living in Kensington, and I remember seeing a great blue heron as a kid, and he was really wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm Lauren, she and her. I live in South Philly, and I think my first bird that I really noticed was a Carolina chickadee.
I'm Ken, he, him, Valley Kinwood, and I saw a chestnut-sided warbler and a magnolia, and I was a little kid. Then I ran and got a book, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I want that with you.
Marty, he, him. I live in Rittenhouse Square neighborhood of Philadelphia, and I grew up with feeders in my backyard and seeing lots of birds. I kind of remember seeing what we call snowbirds, which are dark-eyed Jenkos. But when I really got into birding, I went to visit my sister and brother-in-law who got me into birding, and we went 2 hours away in North Carolina to see one of 2 breeding pairs of scissor-tailed flycatchers that were in North Carolina that year, and got to watch them fly in the scope with their tails sorted out. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I am Art, he, him. I live in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. My first bird, that was a very, very, very long time ago, and I can't remember that far back, but it was probably an American robin when I was about 1 year old.
Thank you.
Change the content.
I'm Barb, she, her, South Jersey. I'll just leave it at that. And all over South Jersey. And first time birds stood out to me were backyard birds. My mom always fed the backyard birds, but I didn't become a birder until much, much later. So
Thank you.
Holger, he, him, South Philly, and again, like other folks, I can't really remember any spark bird necessarily, but it must have been in the early 90s, peregrine falcon or pygmy owl, something like that. I can show Jim says.
Well, let me hold the camera for you.
Sure. Naveen, he, him. I live in East Falls. I used to live in West Philly before, but I've been in East Falls for a while. I don't remember my first bird, but I'm guessing it's probably like a house sparrow. I grew up in Kuwait, and there were house sparrows all over, but I don't think that's what got me interested in birds. But I go to India every summer, and my grandparents' house had like kingfishers and hornbills and stuff like that. So that's probably one of them that stood out to me.
Oh, thank you. Pass the camera back to you. And you can feel free to take your seat. Thank you. What about you? Oh, I'm coming. Oh, it's not done. I'm giving you the extended version. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Katrina Clark. I primarily identify as a teacher, but if you were to talk to any of my teacher friends, they would call me a birder. I'm queer, biracial, Black woman, and I actually grew up in Manayunk, pre-gentrification. And my connection to birds came through seeing what I now know are house sparrows and starlings fighting over crumbs on the sidewalk. With an occasional delight, I had a similar as Charlotte, I would see a pop of color every now and then when a cardinal or a blue jay would show up. I also dodged pigeon poop as I got on the bus, which was on the other side of the R3 overpass, and was still called the R3. For the most part, to be honest, my childhood, birds were invisible and certainly indistinguishable for me. My favorite playground as a kid, you are probably familiar with it, Houston Playground. But I actually didn't realize there was a magical realm behind it until very recently. In fact, I remember being warned away from the ticks. I used to love this, I don't know if you can even see it still, but right around the playground, there's this little spiral. And I used to just run down the spiral. And when you get to the end, it's almost like a path that would go back to Houston Meadow, where, I just been birding a couple of weeks ago. But my mom would say, no, the ticks. She was a nurse and she was very, very careful about that. So I never actually went back there. And where I grew up in Manayunk, right at Leverington and Baker, if you're familiar, I was just a drive away from the Schuylkill Environmental Education Center, but never actually went there, even though I was a few minutes away. So I did grow up going to the Wissahickon a lot. I went to a nursery school when I was very little up in Andorra, and apparently one of my favorite things was to go and throw bread to the ducks. I would never do that now, but I didn't know any better, and I did that a lot back then. So I have a lot of access, but I didn't actually have a lot of information. And really, what is access if you don't actually have the information that goes along with it? What might I have become had I had both access and information as a child? Would I have become a teacher? I don't know. Would I have become a scientist out there protecting our environment today? I don't know. And honestly, the world won't really ever know, because I didn't have, we'll never know my full potential because I didn't have those opportunities when I was young. I can tell you a moment that did not spark my interest in birds. This is me. I was 5 years old. This is me in Jackson Square in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I lived for a few years. And you can see that I'm clearly fascinated, but also terrified of rock pigeon, feral, if you will. So this moment did not inspire a love of birds. In fact, it was only a few years ago, 4 years ago, when the pandemic hit, that I was walking outside just to keep from going stir crazy, when a friend pointed out a bird. A friend is actually online, and she said, "That's a catbird." And I was like, what the hell is a catbird, and what is it doing in Philadelphia? I'm thinking that it had like flown off course from thousands of miles away. I always knew that amazing birds existed. I had gone to the zoo. I'd seen pictures, but with my limited knowledge, my sense was that amazing birds were not connected to anywhere that I was. Certainly not in the city, and certainly nowhere near where I lived. It was only a few years ago that I realized that there were woodpeckers inside of Philadelphia. And if you had asked me then, well, where would you see a woodpecker? First, I would not know. But I probably would have guessed, I don't know, maybe Chester County. I hear there are farms out there. Maybe Lancaster County, it's just so wide and open. Maybe there. I had no idea. The only place I would have seen them would actually have been here. I came here a lot as a child, and I saw a lot of stuffed birds. And then in the Philadelphia Zoo, where I would have walked around. In my mind, those were the only places where you could see anything exotic and rare. And for me, all birds were exotic and rare. And I do not kid you when I say that to see a cardinal or to see a blue jay really was quite a treat for me. I did notice them, but it was so rare that I saw them. I can still remember the exact street where they were because it was the only place really where there were trees in Manayunk. If you're familiar with the area, there just really aren't a lot of trees above the canal. Until you get up into Roxburgh. I was an extremely curious child, and I went to an amazing summer camp. So actually, I went to a lot of hotspots. I didn't know that word yet. For example, Bartram's Garden. I have a lot of great memories being there, but no one ever stopped and pointed out a bird to me, even though I was there in the spring and summer. So with all this access and yet no information, I'm pretty similar to a lot of the children in Philadelphia who, like me, grew up without trees. We have a very low tree canopy in the city, and who often don't have rich summer experiences like I did. And they have no idea that birds are connected to them, even though they live so close to them. So the next potential ornithologist could be sitting in a North Philadelphia classroom tomorrow, 9 a.m., and they don't know it yet. They haven't been introduced to birds yet. And so we'll never get to know their full potential because they haven't been connected to their love of birds. That is sitting there latent, but it needs to be sparked. So at some point soon, each of us is going to be called upon, likely several times, to stand up against this climate change that has been coming our way. And if we find ourselves standing in a small pack, we might not have the strength to win all the things that we need to push back on this very quickly warming Earth. But we need to win, right? So today I want to talk about ways that we can make bird walks more inclusive, so that when it's time to stand up, we have a lot of people who are engaged, fully enthralled with birds, and they're ready to stand up together. And if we do this work now, we can actually have a lot of fun, meet great people, and potentially inspire a lot of us to do the work that needs to get done to help our Earth, to help our birds and our community. So today I'm going to share a few tips and tricks to get people engaged and coming back for more birds. And I'm going to base a lot of what I'm going to say on my 19 years of teaching in the classroom, getting teenagers to read, students to learn when they feel like that's the last thing that they want to do. And I'll also base it on my 2 years of experience as a founding member board member of In Color Birding Club. Okay, so we started today with a circle. I think I might have, well, no, we're good. Okay, we start today with a circle, and shapes matter, not just when IDing birds, but also when we relate to each other. We know Canada geese, for example, fly in a V, and it sets up a relationship they have with each other, and it helps them to survive. And in Color Birding Club, we start in a circle to push back on the idea that there is a hierarchy here. We might each bring some experience, but no one is more important than anyone else. And that includes the leader of the walk. And that's a good thing. If someone feels like they are less than, then they're less likely to get involved, to be engaged, and to keep coming back. And we need people to keep coming back. And in fact, anyone can be the person who spots a rare vagrant bopping around in the brush, even if they're not the one who has the ability to ID it yet. So let's get everyone talking and feeling welcome. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to chat at your table. Charlotte, feel free to join this table, or Sarah might go over there. Okay, there you go. About these questions. What does a leader do? What does it mean to lead a bird walk? What does a leader do? What do they say? What does a leader think about? And as I say in my classroom, be ready to share. And if you're on Zoom, please feel free to share your ideas in the chat.
That's to support your health and so that's all we
Take 10 more seconds.
I guess, I feel like with these Birdwalks, not just that the best burger, but you depend on your pace, so it's like large territory cover, they define what this, but then the trajectory is, we wanna walk within the place you're in, and also like how long you can spend in a certain spot. Exactly.
All right, and bring your attention back up here. Okay. Thanks. What are some ideas? And Barb, I think you're on Zoom, right? If somebody shares, will you let us know? You can call out their answer for us.
Sure,
Okay,
Jason
thanks.
has a good one.
Sure.
Jason, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah.
There
What
we
did you want me to do?
Say what you said in the chat.
Oh, yeah. I wrote that a leader welcomes everyone genuinely, speaks in ways that are inclusive. They think about how to get every single person to a point of joyfulness and community during the outing. Notice there's nothing to do with birds there.
Okay. What are some ideas that came up in your group? Yeah.
Everyone has the ability to spot the bird, to see the bird, to see it. It's just as many eyes as there are.
It sounds like, so as many people are there, as many leaders, that's how many
Yep.
leaders you have. Cool. Okay.
I'm gonna second that.
Yeah.
I don't have the best eyesight. So when I lead walks, I'm not the one spotting birds. It's other people telling me, hey, this bird's here, can you tell me what it is?
Okay.
So I rely on other people on walks I lead to tell me what the bird is.
And share.
Oh, sorry, where the bird is.
Matt Evans, do you want, or Matt? You want to say what? You
Yeah, sure. I said a leader welcomes all types of knowledge. Yeah, just thinking about people who come to bird walks with different knowledge bases, different ways of seeing the world, and welcoming them and celebrating them.
Thanks. Any ideas that came up that you want to share?
Well, we came with the idea that
Mhm.
he's the person who still has to organize the whole thing, so maybe knows the place where you have to go.
Something
The
about,
others might not.
yeah,
know.
seeing the big picture
Right.
of the place.
So
People get excited to look at birds in one spot and you have to move on eventually, right? And then everyone wants to stay and be like, no, let's go, we have a lot more territory that it covers. So.
A little bit of the party pooper, like,
Exactly.
we're having fun, but we gotta keep moving. Okay, totally understand.
But with that, would be also thinking about who's in the group and like, what do they need to get to that space? And like, is it a safe space? And like, is it accessible? And
I would define it as
Mhm.
an enabler. Just to enable the people, the students, whoever they are,
Mhm.
people want to learn, or maybe not want to learn, just try to enable them to learn. And excite them about something. So that's my definition of it.
Thank you. Yeah,
Manny, you want to
okay.
unmute yourself?
Hello. I was saying, like to support and encourage the participants, like kind of, I think good walks that I've been on have, the leader has kind of, instead of just naming the bird, kind of helps teach sort of like, oh, what like identifiers for that specific bird that can help, and maybe encourage people to like learn more about the bird than just being like, oh, that's, whatever bird it is kind of thing.
One of the typical thing I saw was with Merlin. I mean, so many people don't know about Merlin in the act, So you go around and people ask, what are you doing? Say, I'm birding. And say, oh, look here, that's the bird I just saw. Oh, what's that? Then I add, that's a free application you can put on your phone. So essentially it enables, it allows other people also to go into it. They're curious, but they don't, as you said, they don't know these things exist. They don't know that you can actually see the pictures and compare and even record. So that usually I essentially put many people like that onto the app and it's really needed to be interested in.
Yeah. And I think you wanted to say,
I was
yeah,
gonna say
Yeah.
something very similar to what Manny said, like, someone asked me what the bird is, and I'll say, what do you think it is? And try to get the process of like working it out. Where if I have a bird, I'll say, do you want me to tell you what it is? I'll ask that question all the time.
Well, you know, with all these, is there someone else? Or do you want to add something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, you want to try to make people feel comfortable, you know, like the more eyes, the better. And you guys have probably heard this one, but you know, the difference between an expert birder and a newer birder?
What's the difference?
The expert has made a whole lot more mistakes.
That's a good one. That's awesome. I love that. Now I wish I put it in my slide. Okay.
One more thing I'll add.
Yes,
is
please.
that, like birds that are common to you might not be common to everyone else. I remember being at Pines once, and the couple I was with was really excited by red-winged blackbirds. So like, just make sure that you know who your group is and what they might want to see. When I first came to the US, cardinal was so exciting. Like that was my dream bird to see when I first moved to this country. So even common birds can be pretty exciting to some people.
Absolutely.
On that point, I was watching Bluey today with my daughter. It's an Australian show. And in my mind, I like an ibis is a really exotic bird. But I noticed in Bluey, these Australian characters, they kept talking about a bird called a trash chicken. And I was like, what? It turned out to be an ibis. So that's like, for them, they're like pests, but to me, it's exotic. So it totally just, you know, you never know what it's going to mean to different people.
Absolutely. I'm curious now, because you all are bringing your top game here. How many people are leading bird walks? Show of hands. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many people on, or is anybody raising hands on Zoom?
I can't see.
Okay. All right. My goal is at the end that everyone feels empowered to lead a bird walk. And I love that so many hands are going up, and I love that everybody wants people to be so engaged and feel safe. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. Often in our culture, when we hear the word leader, we think of hierarchy, we think of expertise. But what if we considered a leader actually, there we go. Someone who thinks well about a group, who thinks about the big picture. They're not necessarily required to have all the knowledge or even all of the eyesight, in fact. They may not be even the most skilled at IDing a bird, but they might be able to pull everyone in, get them connected with each other. I offer that when you're asked to lead a bird walk, that maybe this definition is more useful, and that might open up some space for you to feel like you can be the person who leads one. So we began with the circle because it gave us this common ground, this grounding experience of being connected and centering our humanness, our humanity. And we're here to relate to each other while also enjoying birds. So as a teacher, when I start a circle like that, I start a classroom that way, it's there for me to have an assessment. I heard someone say checking in, making sure, like, where are people? What do they need? Are they feeling nervous about even being here? Did it take something to even show up in this space? And by acknowledging that, by recognizing that in myself, I can start to identify what it is that they need to feel comfortable and to be able to move through the space in a way that feels safe to them. I can also look for people who can help with expertise, right? We don't have to be the expert at everything. If I'm not the person who's seeing, maybe I'm the person who's listening, or the person who can help with the scope, or help people with binoculars who are newbies. So if there's any group who can pay attention to the body language of humans, it's probably us, birders, because we are already paying attention to those kinds of details. So while you're looking at that Sora sneaking through the brush, you can also take a look over at your fellow walkmates and notice their body language. Are they feeling comfortable? And take the time to introduce ourselves. No one remembers all the names from the circle anyway. So introduce yourself and just say, how are you doing? How are things going? And if you happen to notice later that that person is feeling nervous or feeling overwhelmed, then they already know your name again. You've introduced yourself, you're available. And there's no need to control their entire walk, but make sure that they know that you're there and that they're not alone. If they need you, they'll be able to reach out to you. Okay, and you might be wondering why this is necessary, but I do want to recognize that birding spaces and natural spaces in general often do not feel welcoming to people of color, to people with physical challenges, to women, to queer people. There's been a history of a lack of access, verbal abuse, and physical violence in public that can keep people away from new places unless they have someone or something that is making them feel safe. Christian Cooper's story in Central Park is just one of a myriad of stories of people not feeling safe and not being safe. In Color Birding Club, queer birders, feminist birding club, birdability all have roots in making public spaces more accessible and safe for their constituents. But in addition to physical spaces, group cultures that emphasize or honor competition or individualism and experience without also making space for collaboration, collectivism, and active learning will never even know the people that they might have excluded. People will show up in far less numbers, be less likely to engage and participate. And for the most part, we won't even know that those people never showed up. And who would you even go to ask why you didn't show up, right? So we start off with that circle to honor that everybody has come to this space together. As leaders, right, we can show through our actions that we want people to be there, that we're welcoming. And as an organization, we can think well about a range of people and make our thinking explicit about that this is what it means to welcome people. And this isn't to knock competition. Competition is fun. I use it in the classroom all the time, or even birding alone. Sometimes you just need to be in peace and quiet. We just want to make sure that that both types of cultures are available, right? That there's space for all of those things. And especially on a bird walk, because people generally show up to a bird walk to connect to other human beings while enjoying birds. And if there's any cultural practice that gets in the way, we want to question, does that make sense in this space? If that is getting in the way of people being their full selves. So of course, some of these things can actually be set up ahead of time through the posters that you make or the posts that you make online. This is an example from Feminist Bird Club Philly, where they're very clear about what is accessible, what is not accessible. Are bathrooms available? Will there be clear paths that people could be in a wheelchair? What is the weather expected to be, and what you need to be comfortable in that space? And also an example from In Color Birding Club. Posting this kind of information along with the information about like where and when shows people that you're thinking about them ahead of time, which makes it more likely that people will show up and engage. Okay. You can also communicate clear expectations. And that can sometimes feel nerve-wracking. As a teacher, I have to do this at the beginning of every single school year, and I have to set reminders. And if somebody new comes to the classroom, I then have to reset those expectations, or when we go on a vacation or a snow day like tomorrow, I'm going to have to redo it again on Monday. And it can feel nerve-wracking. It can feel like you're pushing somebody to have a different behavior. But for those people who are not feeling safe, hearing that you have a clear expectation of this is how we treat each other makes people feel like they are welcome and that they belong and they have a space in this place that you created. Let's see. So these are some four things that you can do is the expectations you can set, which are encouraging people to ask questions, celebrating what at ICBC we call bird joy, encouraging people to bring their full self, and this idea that a lot of people brought up that the leader is not necessarily the expert, right? The first way that many of us actually engaged in any new learning task was to ask questions. We wondered why something was the way it was. Ask any parent of any toddler, and they can recall the barrage of questions they get, right? Why is the sky blue? Where do babies come from? Where do we go when we die? And as toddlers, we asked those very same questions as well, and we kept asking until people became a little less interested in the barrage of questions, and maybe they turned their eyes and they start looking another direction and stop encouraging us to do do those same things. And it's funny because we encourage questions in our esteemed scholars, but when a child is asking those questions, it can get really tiresome after a while, and we can stop encouraging it. And yet we want them to be the same people who ask questions in their jobs later on. So I want to say that, what if we bring that back? What if we encourage people to continue to ask questions over and over again? And we're going to get the same questions. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what happens when they don't is that people give up. They stop asking and they stop showing up. And the people who still have that curiosity will be there, but we need more of us. We need more people who are asking questions and caring about birds. And in order to do that, we have to push a little bit further so that those people will feel like they can take a chance again. We can also celebrate bird joy. We know that every birder has a spark bird that took birds from the periphery to the center, that grabbed our attention in some way, that forced us to ask questions and learn more. It sparked something in our human sense of wonder. And some might say it reached into the center of the divine, if you will. And I don't mean that you have to be religious in order to be a birder, not by any means, but there's something that each of us is connected to. And if we can tap into that, because as humans, we have since we've been humans, wondered about how the world works. And so we can tap into that and really experience that awe that comes from seeing maybe a cardinal for the first time, or, any bird that is out of our normal, and then celebrate that time. Okay. So I'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't admit that in the United States, people have some stereotypes about what it means to be a birder. I saw this on Instagram. One day you're young and carefree, and the next you're like, is that a tufted titmouse in my bird feeder? So in general, people think that birders are old, white, and usually male. And while I don't generally see anybody who's gatekeeping and saying that you belong here or you do not belong here, sometimes we can communicate things even through our practices without saying anything at all, that people are or are not welcome. So for example, if bird walks are always very quiet, or they're never in places that are physically accessible, people will question, do I belong here? Is this space for me? And over time, that can start to add up if there are patterns in how things are happening. And this is just as much true about a baseball team as it is about a birding club. So we can push back on that by explicitly stating, as a club, as a bird walk leader, that people should show up as their true full selves, unapologetically Black, unapologetically female, unapologetically queer, young, wheelchair bound, a beginner. And we have to gently but insistently hold space for people who don't fit our traditional idea of birder. And this might require some courageous conversations. Yeah, we want you in this space, and we need to make sure that everyone feels safe. We want you in this space, and we need you to answer questions more thoughtfully, not just give away the answers, but ask, what information do you want? We're all learning, and therefore it's important that when we ask people to be more welcoming, we're not then pushing them out on their own. Our goal is to actually pull everyone in. Okay, actually, I'm going a little ahead of myself. So back to that idea of leader doesn't mean expert. I really do want to reiterate that definition of leader again, that we don't have to be an expert in anything, and that's okay. Instead, we need people who can think well about others, think about the big picture, and encourage people to take chances and to learn, and also ensure the physical and emotional safety of people. Now, for 7 years, I taught at this interdisciplinary project-based school, where as soon as I showed up, I was told, and your students, your 15 to 20 students, need to all make a lamp from scratch, and your students know nothing about electricity. And I was like, and I'm in charge of it? Okay, does that I know how to turn on the switch. That's about all I know, right? So I had to learn right along with them, and I really had to kind of swallow my own pride, and recognize that there were students who learned more about electricity and more quickly than I did, right? So the place that I had to draw the line was really just safety. Okay, because there are no children who are going to get fried on my watch. And I don't want to get fried either. So the line became, is this safe for you? Is this safe for everyone else? But other than that, we get to explore and we get to, and if you move faster than I am, that's great. Please come back and teach me. And then I need your help to teach everybody else, because we're all trying to get somewhere together. And my focus became paying it. Was that a question on? No. Okay. On Zoom. Okay. We're good. Okay. All right. Just making sure. Sometimes it sounds like that when people come off Zoom. I've just had a flashback to the pandemic when I was teaching online. Okay. All right. So a few cultural shifts that we can consider to become aware of as we go through this idea of no bad birds, checking in with people, this idea of good energy versus quietude, encouraging growth without assumptions, and allowing for practice and problem solving. Okay. For those of you who are not aware, sometimes people will get a little disappointed. You're looking for, you know, a morning warbler that's skulking through the brush, and you actually come across maybe a less rare bird. Ooh, real good.
It sounds like it's over here.
Oh, it's probably both of them then. Is it a speaker? I don't know. Oh, in the corner.
So we're hearing weird sounds in the room.
Okay.
People are concerned on Zoom.
Maybe that's the morning warbler we've been looking for. Okay. We're good. Right. So respect and disrespect can be actually built into the language that we're using. And while if I'm looking for a short ear owl and I come across a house sparrow, I might feel some disappointment. I want to be careful about the language I use when leading a bird walk. Each of us has evolved in our own special and unique way to play a role in the environment that we're in. And so the presence of a house sparrow or a robin is really more about the place that you're in versus the value of any particular being. And so we get to push back on any place where we hold on to an idea that one being is greater than or lesser than another. And this is aspirational, right? If my language slips, I can own it, I can correct it, and I can then celebrate that bird and move on. It doesn't really behoove anyone for me to beat myself up or for anyone else to beat themselves up. Okay. All right. Another thing we want to do is checking in. And I heard a lot of people say that when you ask, what does it mean to be a bird leader? As we're going through, we're going to ask them, asking people, well, people will be asking themselves, do I belong here? Is this a space for me? And they may not say that out loud. But we've seen people show up for a bird walk and then not show up again. Why? Why are they not showing up again? What didn't quite spark their attention or didn't hold on or didn't make them feel safe enough? So we need to remind that they're connected and welcome no matter what level of birding interest or birding skill they have. And if we set up this expectation of warmth and welcome at the beginning of the walk, for example, with a circle, if someone steps outside of that expectation, we can warmly interrupt and then model what positive behavior looks like. Again, sounding like the classroom because that's where I spend my time. And this would feel really strange if we hadn't set up those expectations at the beginning. By making clear statements about what expectations are, then when somebody steps out, they're much more likely to step right back in. If you've ever gone on a walk with ICBC or Queer Birders or Feminist Birding Club, you see this, like these statements made. Actually, they're on the flyers, then statements are made. The expectation is that we take care of ourselves and that we treat everybody with respect. It's simple, but everybody understands exactly what's expected of them. At this point, I haven't seen anybody step outside of that, but if it were to happen, it would be an easy side conversation that allows them to readjust and then move right back in. But one question I do get from a lot of people, is it okay to be loud at a bird walk? Often a lot of bird walks I've been on have been very, very quiet. Yeah, people are talking, but this mindfulness of kind of not scaring away the birds But I want to say that I've been on an enormous amount of bird walks where we are literally dressed as birds, as you can see here, and having a full loud blast, and the birds really don't mind. Doesn't mean that no birds would mind, but I want to push back on this idea that we have to be quiet. Sometimes that can feel really hard to do for people who haven't been sparked yet. They are wondering, and I've been asked that question many times, can I make noise? Can I talk? Can I be boisterous and excited? And we've had at ICBC, we have hooting and hollering more than owls over the common birds, but it's the first time that you were able to ID one, the first time a new person got to really see a bird and pay attention to it. So yes, getting close to a bird, running up on a bird, that is absolutely going to chase a bird away. I do not recommend that, but mostly because we want to be respectful of their space. But the sound doesn't seem to matter as much, except for a couple. I mean, a few mallards will probably swim away for about 10 feet. I've done that recently, not on purpose. So we get to model how to be boisterous and also ask for, hey, this is a moment of quietude. We want to use Merlin to help ID this bird, or we want to listen to this beautiful bird song in the middle of spring migration. And we get to just truly be our full selves and enjoy being loud in a space as well. Okay. We also want to encourage growth, but balance that with not making assumptions about people. You never know who you're speaking to at a moment. I just finished, actually on the drive here, I was listening to Christian Cooper's Better Living Through Birding. And there was this story that really stood out to me. He was a little boy, I think around 9, and he had been looking at these bird books for weeks. He's been studying them. And he says to his dad, who's a science teacher, I really want to go out and see birds. And his dad finds a bird walk. This is before the internet. So like, he's really like asking around. And they show up a bird walk on Long Island. And they're the only Black people in this group. Christian even guesses they might have been the only Black people who have ever shown up to this group. And he's already like, is this safe? Am I allowed to be here? Do I belong here? And the group leader puts his scope up and announces, 2 American woodcocks, please step up to the scope and come look. And so Christian goes up and he looks through the scope and he's like, Dad, I think those are American woodcocks. And his dad is like, well, you should speak up, son. He's a teacher. He's all about speaking up. He's like, speak up. Okay. So he goes up to the leader and he's like, I don't think those are American woodcocks. Now, the leader had a lot of opportunity. I mean, there's different ways he could have responded, right? He could have ignored Christian, like, who does he think he is? Like, you just showed up. I've been doing this since before you were born, right? He could have dug his heels and they are absolutely American. You're telling me I don't know what American woodcock looks like. He could have made snide comments to others, getting everybody laughing. He thinks he knows better. He could have also owned up to it and corrected it, but not given any acknowledgement whatsoever. Yes, they are actually Wilson snipes. And it turns out that Christian was right, that they were Wilson snipes in the scope. And the bird walk leader actually responded in a very particular way. Not only did he own up to that and say, oh, actually, thank you for that information. He gave credit to Christian, a young boy at the time, first bird walk ever. And it changed Christian's life. Not only is he now writing the book, that I just read, not only is he now traveling the world and he's on a show, but this man became a mentor for Christian. He was the first mentor that Christian had in learning about birds. I did not mean this pun at all. He took him under his wing. And I saw it coming in my brain. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go with it. He took him under his wing and really taught him all the basics about birding and showed him basically the beginnings of hotspots back in I think it was the early 80s that it happened. Now, Christian had showed up, still not out to his parents, like questioning, does he belong not only at this bird walk, but in the world? And the response of the bird walk leader made him feel for the first time like he didn't have to question whether he belonged. Is that enough for everyone? Just one Birdwalk? No, but that makes a difference if you have a space where you do belong. And for Christian, birding became that safe space when the world did not feel safe. Which is why, of course, it made such a big deal when it became not so safe for a moment later in his life. So each of us can be significant to someone just by spending that time, that energy to mentor, instead of laugh, instead of disregard, instead of putting down. And I've seen both of those things happen in these communities, in our particular community. I've seen so many great people standing up, and I've seen people dismissed and put down as new birders. And so we have a choice that we get to make. All right, so 2 more things I want to teach you about that come straight from the classroom. Oh yeah, I was supposed to show that earlier. Right, some things that's useful to know about new learners of any topic is that they're going to both overuse and underuse any skills that they're learning. That's just how humans work. We can only process so much information at one time. And so, yes, there's likely going to be someone who sees a golden eagle in a juvenile bald eagle's wings. I'm sure the first time I see a golden eagle, because I still haven't yet, I will not know quite. I won't be 100% sure. I'm waiting for that day to find out. But there's also going to be someone who sees a black bird with spots and a little yellow beak sitting on top of some telephone wires. These are actual texts that I receive constantly. Yeah, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm wondering if you could answer, what are these gorgeous birds? Cute bird while I'm here in Paris. They're a little purple on their chest. What are they? Yes, we are absolutely going to get those questions about the starling darlings, the darling starlings. And you might get the same questions over and over again. But are these people who have never noticed birds before, and all of a sudden, because of your connection to them, feel safe to ask? Because I can tell you, my Aunt Susie had never asked me about a bird before and really never noticed a bird, and now she sends me pictures all the time, even when she's in Paris. Right, okay. And yeah, we could see it as frustrating or annoying, but if we reframe, it's actually a win, right? It's one more person noticing the natural world, one more person connecting with birds. And when the time comes for us to have to protect birds, because unfortunately those times are coming and they're coming soon, we are going to need those people. So new learners of any sort, in addition to practice, they're also going to need time and space to problem solve. And we might be tempted to jump right in. Remind me of your name again, please. Ken. But Ken gave us a great idea, which is ask them what they need. Figure out what they need first before jumping in. You can say, what do you notice? How do you know? Notice this. Look at this. What do you think this might be? And this is not to quiz somebody. It's not to jump in and be the Jeopardy leader, but rather to see what step they need next. You're assessing what it is that they need. So someone spots a bird and wonders, is it a scarlet tanager, right? Well, what do you notice? What's the size? What's the color? Where was it? Just asking people to focus their attention on those things, it takes a little longer. It absolutely does. But then that person is then going to do that same thing for someone else because they have the ability to pay attention to those details. If someone wants an ID, you can give them the ID. It's not about making someone's life miserable or putting them through the ringer. We just want to give them the opportunity, give them the choice of learning or just hearing what it is what that bird is. And I know sometimes this can be hard because sometimes as humans, we really like feeling like we're the expert. It really can be hard. But by decentering ourselves, we open a space for opportunities. And the more people that we can pull in and get engaged, the more likely we'll have a lot of people together when it comes time to speak up for birds. Okay. Okay. So at the beginning, you got a sense of where people are starting through your circle. But you can also drop these seeds of knowledge that you have based on what their needs are. Beginner birders might need more basics, like how to use binoculars, and intermediate birders might need to distinguish between the drab and olive warblers. But you can also share what you know about how climate change is affecting birds, sharing how the range of Carolina chickadees and black-capped chickadees is changing, right? Why is it difficult to ID them in our area, and how that might change further with climate change? And it might actually get easier, but that's not necessarily a good sign. And these little connections of how humans affect other beings can go a long way when we're enjoying ourselves, because it's easier to take in that information when we're when we're having fun. And we can notice that our actions really do matter. In other places, it can feel really overwhelming. And sometimes we want to take even bigger actions. So I want to share something that In Color Birding Club has been doing. If you're ready to take on some bigger steps beyond becoming a Birdwalk leader, we have started reaching out and finding and making spaces more accessible to young people. We have started this bus sponsorship program. So I was having a conversation with Jason Hall, founder of In Color Birding Club, who's on the Zoom, and I share with him that there are just so many free places in the city itself and just outside that teachers could potentially take their students, but there was a barrier, there was a limit, because it takes about $250, and now post-pandemic more like $300 to rent a bus. And you can get about one and a half to two classes on a bus. But that sounds like a little bit of money, $300 for 30 kids. It's only $10. Everybody just pitch in. But really, we have an enormous amount of people in Philadelphia who cannot afford that, especially if you have multiple children. You can't just pop out $10 to send your child to go on a field trip. And so teachers are very reluctant to actually have field trips if busing is not included. Now, some people have realized that, some organizations have realized it and started offering busing as part of their program, like the Philadelphia Zoo, for example. But we realized that we could get enormous amount of students out into natural spaces if we did two things. One, let them know where these natural spaces are and give them the information they need about it. And we use this to do that. We created a document that has a list. This is only part of the list. It goes much further down, where the space is. And the biggest question, are there bathrooms? Because you don't want to be a teacher with a bunch of young people and you don't have a bathroom, or you're not prepared. And so just giving the information. So they already have access. This is free. They have the information. The only other barrier left was to get them there. And so for $250 to $300 a pop, you could get an entire classroom full of students and a teacher out to a space. And we opened this up. We'll be opening this up again this spring. But we had more than 200 students be able to access green spaces last year. Sometimes, depending on our schedule, we were able to send somebody from ICBC on the walk with them. Before we even started this program, I was just able to ask a few people, hey, can you come to a bird walk with my students at Hines? And at that point, it was 90 students who got to experience a bird walk led by somebody who didn't have to be an expert, but was comfortable in that space. And that was our message here. This space is for you as well. And so I just want to give a shout out, because DVOC and Natural Lands have actually donated money to make this possible. And so those students, two of whom wanted to become zoologists, got to be there and ask questions with adults who cared to answer those questions. Okay. All right. So overall, whether you're being a birdwalk leader or something, or taking on a bigger program, the decisions we make should be about something greater than ourselves. We need to look towards the future when we decide how we're going to allocate our time, how we're going to allocate our money and our energy. We personally will not always be here. And I think it would be really sad if we knew that no other birders were going to come after us, or that there would be less birds to even be seen in the future. So I think it's important to ask ourselves what effect our actions will have on the generations to come. If I include or exclude people, will this lead to a world with or without birders? Will it lead to a world with or without birds? And if I encourage or discourage new people from joining, will this lead to a world of more or less birders and birds to actually look at? Because if the birds leave at the end of my life, I think that all this time appreciating or chasing would not have been worth it. But if there are more birds and more birders than now, then each moment has a legacy, and that will live on for many generations to come. So just to review, here are some things that you can do, small steps and some bigger shifts that can lead to more people showing up, engaging, and taking care of birds. First of all, we can be human first. Make yourself available to people on a bird walk, even if you're not leading. Set clear expectations when you are, and honor lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. And take the time to celebrate bird joy. Make space for everyone, including yourself, to be their full selves. Have courageous conversations when people do step outside of expectations. Don't push them out, though. Pull them in. We want to keep them as well. And push back on this idea. There are no bad birds. Check in with people, see how they're doing and see what they need, and make space for different energies. It might be okay if people are boisterous and loud, that might be what they're used to, and it's probably going to be okay in that space. And it's okay to also say, let's take a moment and be quiet and listen to this particular thing, but make sure that there's space for people to be both ways. And encourage growth, but without assumptions about what people need. Check in, assess what they need first, and allow time for practice and problem solving. Feel free to plant seeds of knowledge, especially about climate change and how we can take steps to end that. And make sure that we remove barriers to access from small, this is how you use binoculars, to big, let's make sure that you get to some green space so you can fall in love with birds just like we do. And first and foremost, keep 7 generations in mind, because if we're not thinking about the future, then there won't be much to do this for. All right. So next steps that you can take is, if you're not ready to lead a bird walk, offer to support someone who's already leading. Hey, can I be your tech person and help people with binoculars while you're guiding us around? Or, hey, you said that you don't see very well, but I can help you point out some birds to you. You can check in with someone on a bird walk, even if you're not leading, to see how they're enjoying themselves. Again, just introducing yourself, your name, to know that let them know you're available. And you can also lead a bird walk alone or do it with someone. I often see just one person doing it, but there's no reason why you can't do it with a pair, especially if you're feeling nervous about starting. And then invite someone who's not usually at the center to be a leader, because they can then bring more people who you might not be connected to. And you can make a plan together about how it can go well for everyone. Okay. And at some point, and I don't know if it's going to be this year or in 5 years and 10 years, but at some point we're going to have to take action against climate change to protect birds. And when that time comes, it's going to matter if we have people who know us and who trust us to listen when we say, here's the action that we want to take. And so when we lead bird walks, we have an opportunity to really engage people, expose people to the wonders that birds bring us, and then also get them to stand up to take action. Because as beautiful as they are, the birds can't talk in the way that they need to in order to get the help that they need. We might be the ones who are most willing to stand up so that those birds are protected. And we can engage people effectively to build relationships. So when it's time to stand up, people will actually stand with us. That is my talk for today. I do want to just thank some people, Nicole for photos, ICBC, FBC, and Queer Birders for their Birdwalk flyers and their great culture, to friends and family for their bird text. Avery, your report gave me the eagle pics, and Elizabeth Cesarini, who's on this call still, I hope, who's the first person who pointed out a catbird on a fence that got me piqued and interested in birding. Thank you. I did a lot of talking. So are there any questions either here? And I guess, Barb, do you still have the Zoom in case anybody has questions? Okay, thanks.
If you have questions on
Yeah.
Zoom, please put it in the chat or
Okay.
raise your hand and Barb will call you up.
And if you could, if you could stop sharing, I could see people.
Okay. I don't know if I did that. Okay.
let me-
Like 90 students or whatever in your trips, how do you organize so many people?
That's a great question. So when I had 90 students, there were 3 teachers. And in that case, I was very lucky to have 4 people from In Color Birding Club come with me. So when it was 90 students, I think we might have, no, actually, we might have had 6 teachers for that one. And so, yes, it does help to have some people who are help managing just the everyday young people questions. I'm cold, I don't want to be here, or I need to go to the bathroom. We're not typically going to see that. And I would suggest don't do it alone. Bring somebody else with you. That's my biggest thing. The more people we have thinking about the whole group, the better. I loved your idea about having that big picture, but why do you have to be the only one to have the big picture? We can have others as well. Yeah. Mhm. Still not showing up?
No,
Okay.
I don't know where my window went. Like, it's somewhere.
Or
Huh.
do you turn off Zoom?
This is the only window I have for some reason, and
It looks like it's not on.
it is on, right, Barb? Like,
Do you see Naveen in there?
I'm still sharing.
Oh, oh, it still says sharing.
yeah,
Oh,
I just got my.
it's not the thing that. Oh,
Oh,
there you go.
Hey,
Well-
with the behind the scenes controls.
Who was that person behind?
Okay, so anybody in the room have any? I can see all you. If anybody has a question on Zoom, you can unmute yourself, and please raise your hand so I can see that you want to ask a question. Anybody out there?
Something in chat?
I'll ask the question.
Oh, Jason. Oh,
Let's go.
no, Jason's clapping.
Oh.
So,
Oh, Carol, go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, I have one, I loved the presentation and I would want to really follow your suggestions if I ever did lead a walk. It's not something I've ever done. One thing it reminded me of, though, that has been a challenge just a couple of times, and I don't know the ideal answer to it, is that I spend a lot of time at the Heinz Refuge, and I do 2 things there. I bird a lot, and I also help them with the weeding to try to improve the ecosystem there. And even when I'm weeding, I'll have binoculars with me in case there's a great bird goes by. And if people walk by birding, I might engage with them about what they're seeing. People often ask me what I'm doing, and it's very difficult to know the right answer to tell people about weeding invasive plants in case that might seem to have an analogy to the whole question of there being good things and bad things, because there is a non-native things, or especially aggressive non-native things, are actually bad according to what we're doing in weed warrioring. And so finding the right way to say that, not quite being sure who the person is, like how young or old the people are ready to understand that, or how much I should get into it. And so I just want to float that out there, because most of the time it's fine. And every once in a while, I just wonder, gee, did I do that right?
Well, shout out to you for saying something. Because I think sometimes it's easier to just let it go by, and just say, I'm getting rid of the bad plants. But you're already thinking about it. You're right. There's not one answer, and it definitely depends on how old someone is. I probably would not say the same thing to a 3-year-old that I would say to a 30-year-old. But I think we can avoid good and bad. We can avoid the judgment words. Some plants take up more energy than our environment can handle. And so I'm removing those so that other plants can have a chance to live. Might be a really simple answer. And if the person engages you back, then you know that you can dig a little deeper if that's what they're looking for. But number one is shout out to you for speaking up. Anybody else have any ideas that they want to share?
It's the same thing for and you have 60 or 80 mute swans at John Hines, I mean, you know, begins to be too much. So it's
And people love those birds.
Yeah.
When people come in and they're not familiar with birds and they don't realize they're an invasive species, I mean, in some ways that's a spark bird for some people, right? It might not be getting them completely into birding, but they think they're in a magical place because of it. And so it's just a little bit of dropping a little bit of a seed of knowledge there. Yeah, they're so beautiful. It's so nice to see them. Did you know they're invasive? Do you know what invasive means? You don't have to put the judgment on there. I think people can make that decision for themselves. Just the information is what they need. I think there's a hand. Hey, Tanya.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I was struggling to unmute. So I have a question because it strikes me that it's different when I go on an ICBC walk, but I'm curious, what is your measurement of success for a walk?
That is a great question, right? Because I don't think it's just numbers. I do like to see when people come back, mostly because I can tell that they're safe. You don't generally go back to places that you don't feel safe. That's just not a human thing to do. And so seeing people come back and bring other people is another sign that they feel really good about what they're doing. And so we've seen our kind of regulars grow because one person had a really good time and they brought someone else, and then that person, they bring a family, and then that one person really wants to, you know, really enjoys it, so they keep coming back. It's not that everybody has to come back. Maybe it's not birding that's going to do it. Maybe it's rocks that connect them to the natural world, or maybe it's you know, maybe it's amphibians. So that's okay. But are people smiling? Are people expressing their joy? Are they able to feel safe and connected in that space? I think that matters even if they only come one time. Does anybody else from ICBC want to speak up? I know there are a few people here. Oh, or them. Well, I can't see. I don't know if everybody.
Oh,
yeah.
This is Jason. I was just gonna say, like, that's perfect, and it goes into the social media part of stuff too. When you see people that have come to one walk and then they're throwing stuff on the Facebook group and asking what bird this is, or you get heroes out there like Rand Quinn who start out as new birders and all of a sudden they're just all over the place grabbing photos, and like, you know, it's really, that's the measure of success. I don't think we've ever tallied how many birds we've seen in terms of that metric. It's just, you know, it's more about the birders, and the more good and welcoming birders you have, the more good birds you're going to find.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
When you take your students to the tours, do you do follow-ups? How essentially in the class, whether they, you know, how they felt about it, what they maybe learned, you know, whether they have questions. Are there follow-ups on these tours?
Did you say, oh, photo X?
No,
or
follow-ups.
Oh, follow-ups. Oh, yes. So I'm going to say that there are two different types of field trips. There's the field trips you just try to get out of the school. But most field trips are educational. We're trying to have a certain experience, right, with our students. And so a solid teacher should be, I mean, I'm going to check in on the bus back, right? I'm like, as students are getting settled, I'm asking them to think about, like, what was a pro? What was a con? What did you enjoy? Did anything make you feel nervous? And I'm going to be asking questions that are connected to whatever that goal, the objective was of that lesson, because I see that as a lesson. Now, when I was at the project-based school, that would then fit in. I mean, that was a one-day lesson that fit into a much larger project. And often it was about educating someone else, right? So take what you learned here and then apply it to someone else. How could you teach a younger person? How could you teach a family member about what you learned? How can you, you know, either take something that we learned in class and apply it outside, or vice versa? What did you learn outside and then apply it to broader situations? So if you're talking about a learning experience, I think there always has to be reflection and follow-up, like always. If it's just one of those times where the children are antsy and you need to get out, I probably would still ask, but that's just me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had a question for anyone who's let it walk, and it made me think of a more specific question for you about the students. So I'm gonna ask that one
Sure.
first and then the more general one, but. With the students, do you ever have students who just really don't want to be there, and how do you deal with that? And then for generally leading walks, have you ever had anyone who came and more or less unintentionally probably, but have they ever been disruptive in some way, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. I'll answer that one really. I actually haven't experienced that, especially on an ICBC walk. Again, Jason, jump in if you feel like you remember anything. But we have clear expectations. And one thing about humans is we really like pleasing other people and meeting expectations. You just need to know what the expectations are. I would say most behaviors happen that we consider antisocial because they're bringing that behavior that works in one space and they're bringing it to another space. It's not that it's necessarily even a bad thing. It's just that it works here and it doesn't work here, but they didn't know. They didn't know about the transition, but I haven't actually experienced it. But there were also clear expectations and a lot of love and engagement there. And then your other question was, that was about my specific students, but you also said in general. So, about whether students don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. Students get very nervous. I'm speaking specifically now about Black and brown students from the city get really nervous when you say we're going out to. John Hines is a scary place. If you are not used to being around trees. In particular places, I mean, just thinking like even like Warbler Woods, you turn around and you're just surrounded by trees. And in Philadelphia, it's very easy to not ever have that experience, ever. Right. It is possible to not see any trees at all. Right. In some places in West Philly and North Philly, you look around and there are 0 trees around you, which is why Temple is a migrant trap, right? Because they have like 10 trees and it's the only place for them to land there. So yeah, it can be really scary. And so as a teacher, what I do in those moments is actually give them a picture, show them pictures. This is what it's going to look like. And it's almost like exposure therapy a little bit, like, okay, what do you think about when you see 100 trees when you're used to seeing only maybe 10 trees, right? Oh no, you're not taking me out in the woods. You're trying to kill me. Okay, so we might feel a little afraid. Who will be there if you feel nervous about it? Yes, I will be there with you. Have I ever tried to kill you before? No, we're good. You'll also have so-and-so. What other adults will be there that feel safe? And then I might, like, if there's somebody I can introduce them to through Zoom, because that's a tool now, or immediately before going fully in the space, you know, for example, when I went, Jason, he's the one who greeted the group and introduced them. And then we had other ICBC people there as well. And he actually specifically spoke to, hey, this can feel really scary to be out in the woods, but I want you to know that Black and brown people, we belong here just as much as anybody else, and that it can feel scary, but we actually are safe and we're going to make sure you're safe. So being explicit did help. Now, by the end, huge smiles, lots of joviality, like just beaming. And I think there were probably some things they couldn't even fully reflect on and put words to, because they had not necessarily connected to nature in that way before, unless their family had been there. But actually most of their families, even though we were coming from like King Sessing, which is really, really close to high. I mean, it's just, you know, like a 10-minute, 15-minute drive, had not been there. But they were like, oh, maybe I'll ask somebody to bring me here again. You know, did most of them do it? No, I don't think one time was enough, honestly. But they considered it. And that was a change. And maybe they went to, you know, maybe they decided to walk through the park instead of through just a random street that day, because that was an option for them. So it is step by step, little by little. And yes, there can be fear. And so I think it's important to address it head on. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about
Of course.
So like the more not walks with students per se, but like the ICBC walks, for example. Like one of the things I love is the intergenerationality of it. And just wondering, like, what are the considerations to make a space where that serves like the oldest and the youngest, and the different energies and the different physical abilities and the different cognitive abilities? Like, how do you
absolutely
address cater to all of it?
Yeah. Well, so one thing it helps. Oh,
Before
yep,
you answer
yep.
that, could you just repeat it?
Yes, thank you, thank you, yes. So
Question.
on ICBC walks, we often have a very intergenerational crowd. We'll have people who we would consider elders, and we have people who like as young as like 3 or 2, or how old is your daughter?
3 now, but she was 2.
Yeah.
She was less than 2.
Yeah, she might have been our youngest walker, and she wasn't even riding, right? She wasn't walking. And so how do you engage all of those people at the same time? What can you take into consideration? So the first thing that is and usually it's Jason who does this, is just a poster, like whatever we're posting, usually on social media, Facebook. Older people go to Facebook, younger people go to Instagram. I'm both. But like saying, here's what you can expect here, right? There are going to be, it's going to be rough terrain. Wear solid shoes. This is going to be a very flat surface that's paved. Lets people know, like they get to make decisions for themselves. I'm not really up for that. My knee is acting up today. And we've actually had people say that to like, oh, actually that sounds safe enough that I can bring some young people along with me, or my mother along with me. So just ahead of time, they have information. And then we have more than one person helping to lead the walk. So Jason might be the primary leader of a particular walk, but then we have Jeff who's listening for birds, and often like the more experienced birders will like go towards him because they might go chasing after something that another person would be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I tend to hang out, and Nicole, we tend to hang out with the younger folk. So when there's like the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds and the 5 through maybe 10, or even 12, we'll be checking in with them. It's not that, I have to be honest, we haven't actually had that conversation. We just have naturally done that. And then like, and then Angela's mingling around with other folks and helping them with like their binoculars or answering questions about birds. And it's not that we have necessarily a set role that we have. And then Bernie's out there, sharing his photographs with everybody. Maybe they can't see it. So he's like, here's what we saw, which makes it really accessible for the people, because we have people who literally can't get the bird in the binoculars, right? So like we have absolute beginners, never touched binoculars in their lives. And so just having more than one leader helps to meet multiple needs. And sometimes just a quick like, oh, if you help over there, I'll help over here kind of moment. But it can only do that if you have more than one person. And I say, if you're leading a bird walk on your own, you can reach out, because there's a lot of us who come to a lot of bird walks together and say like, hey, I don't know a lot of these people, but I know you. Can you help people with binoculars if I help people with the scope? Like little things like that. And the scope is another thing that has allowed a lot of people to have access. We talked about even getting a scope that turns, so that like people on wheelchairs or people who are much shorter don't have to like climb up on something or be lifted up, which can feel really like this, like it doesn't feel good to have your body kind of controlled to be able to see a bird. So just being able to access that in your own space, wherever that space is, can be really helpful. And that also then helps people from different generations access it as well. Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
Ian Salisbury.
Hi, that's me. Hi, I just have a quick question. For someone that's more like introverted but wants to get more comfortable with leading bird walks and, interacting with people more, are there any like tips or advice that you would maybe give to somebody in that position?
Yeah, I mean, my first one is, why do you have to do it by yourself? Right? Who is somebody you feel comfortable with who could also help out? So maybe that person, like if we did one together, I have no issue at all being loud and getting everyone's attention, right? But you could be the quiet person who's guiding us around and thinking about the safe way to travel through a space. So having somebody who has different strengths than you, like doing it with you, is great to have, because then you can take care of different things and you're thinking about different things at the same time. We think of bird walks as being led by one person, but there's no reason they have to be. And I think ICBC has really pushed back on that idea in a really good way. And if you ever want to try it out, Ian, then you can reach out to me and we can lead a bird walk together.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Jason, Paul, if you would go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to respond to Ian as well. Is like, there are other birders out there that are also introverted. So you could also design your bird outing to cater to those folks, just like you, right? You could go to the Schuylkill Center and cater a bird walk that's around maybe a little bit more subtlety and quietness, and you could have different things, and you can ask any of us on this call or anywhere around how you could design that, right? So you have that opportunity. We all do as bird walk, quote unquote leaders or procurers. So really good question. Thanks.
Yeah. And I love that addition that you had there, Jason, about like you can set up a bird walk to be a particular way. One thing that I didn't bring up that a lot of the smaller bird groups do is we have like the little sit. We do that at least twice a year. Bartram's, we've done it at was it Laurel Hill Cemetery? There's one other place that I'm missing. But that is also another way to get people involved that doesn't require you having to really lead people somewhere. Really, like people just come and they mill about, and they can wander, they can come back, they can stay in one place. And that could be, they really just need a person to say, hey, this is the place right here. And then it's actually much more chill, I would say, than most bird walks, because people are, enjoying a cup of coffee, just enjoying being outside, or like really going off and chasing a bird across Bartram Garden because they want to, but you don't have to do all of it. And I think you get to communicate what the expectations are in however you're communicating that there is a bird walk, and say, hey, we're going to have a quiet bird walk. It doesn't, there's no reason that, as long as you're clear about that, I think that's okay. And, or we're going to have a loud, boisterous bird walk because that's how this, you can offer options. I think that's okay as well. You just want to communicate what the expectation is, because people want to meet expectations. Cool. All right.
I guess I have one question. Okay. I know you lead a lot of bird walks for like younger children. Mm-hmm. I've not led a bird walk for kids specifically, but I've led like nature walks, and I know how to keep them engaged with like nature walks.
Yeah.
But like a bird walk seems very hard to me to keep kids engaged. Like with the nature walk, like, oh, go flip that rock for me. Tell me what's there. Look under the tree bark and see what you can find. But with a bird walk, it just seems a lot more challenging to me.
What seems more challenging for you?
It's less active. Like I cannot tell them to like go flip a rock.
Okay.
Right. And like you're looking through binoculars. Mm-hmm. And a lot of kids, it's not that exciting to look through binoculars sometimes. It's not easy for them. Yeah. While like I led a nature walk for like a Girls Club troop, and like they were seeing things on trees that I couldn't even see with my eyes. Like they could see easily.
I hear you.
But with the bird walk, it's slightly different because you have to look through binoculars. So how do you keep kids engaged?
Yeah, so I mean, number one is you have to teach how to use binoculars. And I think that's actually a good thing to check in no matter what the bird walk is that you're doing. It's just a quick question. Does anybody need help getting started with binoculars? And the people are generally honest, or you'll see them kind of, it's cool. If it's one person, hey, let's walk together while we're getting started. And if it's a bunch of people, hey, let me do a tutorial over here real quick for the people who are getting started. And you want to teach like really the basics and then have them practice on something still. If it's teenagers or younger, I might have them practice on each other because that's just hilarious. And so they're laughing already, right? Like, whoa, you're right there, that kind of thing. And then I would check in with, that's where the checking in comes in, because you're like, hey, how's it going? I've absolutely taught someone how to use binoculars and then saw them staring through the opposite side. And I'm like, hey, how's that working? Heck, have you tried it the other way? Which way do you like better? If they like it the other way better, go for it. It's your walk. But, generally they'll switch it and be like, oh, this works so much better. That's awesome. So you get to be light, like have a really light tone, and also like, hey, you get to make choices for yourself. I mean, I've definitely had toddlers who wanted to look through the opposite end because that just looked really cool to them. If that's what engages them, I mean, who am I to say that they're wrong? Just being out in that space is working. So let's keep them engaged in that way. I have absolutely seen teenagers who I'm going to guess that like is far from when you hear the word birder, like this is what they look like, and did not want to be there and absolutely said, I don't want to be here. This doesn't sound like fun at all. Say like, oh, yeah, there's something here. This is something I want to do. And that is in one bird walk in about an hour, right? Because that's how sparks work, right? It's just like the kindling is there, and you just need that right spark that like catches and you're there. Jason, you probably know who I'm talking about. Like it was just at like Centennial Lake, you know, we're not talking about like a million birds flying. Actually, that would probably be too much, you know, but being able to see, you know, a red-tailed hawk that's sitting there still, and you get to see it preening its feathers. Like we're talking about people who have not looked at birds, not even pigeons or, you know, or starlings or house sparrows, because a lot of people haven't, right? Like I did not pay attention to that 4 years ago. I just didn't. And, you know, so just being able to see that happening so close, having a scope helps, I think, for any age really, but beginners, because they might have trouble, but then they can still see it through the scope in the detail. It's like being in a nature video, but you're there, you know, and it doesn't take a lot of explanation to get there. They just feel it. So, yeah.
I made an anecdote with my daughter. I think she's younger than maybe the kids you're talking about. She is 3, but like when we go on the walks, she's totally looking at in the binoculars backwards. She's building things with sticks. She's playing on the playground. There's like no bird watching going on, but she will still come home and say, "I'm a birder, Mom."
Wow,
or, you know, like, or we'll be out somewhere else and she'll be like, Mom, a bird, you know. So it's like, so I guess that my point is like, maybe it doesn't matter if they're not actually looking at the birds, but if they walk away feeling like they can own the identity, or like, you know, they'll sink in eventually.
Absolutely. Right. And maybe they're going to find their thing through rocks, you know, and that's okay. Like we just want people taking care of the planet so that we have birds to be around. And if it's through rocks, then it's through rocks. And if it's through birds, it's through birds. And if it's through amphibians, that's fine as well. Yeah.
Anything else? Oh, going on. Anyone else? Okay.
I will thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.